debate. The honourable member.
Point of privilege, Madam Chair.
Not even a point of privilege, neither one. The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Madam Speaker, I begin my remarks by recognizing the hardworking people who live in the Ontario riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke for their confidence in me as their federal member of parliament. They're the reason I will not waver in my determination to build a better Canada. Earlier this year, I asked a very simple and direct question to the Prime Minister regarding the inappropriate use of Canada's women and men who serve in Canada's armed forces to spy on their fellow citizens. Rather than answer in a clear and forthright manner, the Liberal government once again responded with a propaganda technique that Russian madman Vladimir Putin uses to misinform the Russian population about the genocide taking place in Ukraine. The propaganda technique I'm referring to is illuminated in the Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide as accusation in a mirror. Accusation in a mirror, or AIM, is a rhetorical practice of falsely accusing others of conducting, plotting, or committing precisely the same transgressions as one plans to commit against them. The claim by the Prime Minister and his senior members in the Liberal Party that members of the Freedom Convoy were racist, misogynist, and unacceptable is a textbook example of accusation in a mirror, of dehumanizing and demonizing that comes by labeling certain groups in society as undesirable. Canadians can see the hypocrisy in the Prime Minister accusing others of being racist, as he did today during question period, when the Prime Minister himself enjoys dressing up in costumes and in blackface to make fun of other people's cultures and skin color. The accusation in the mirror propaganda technique has been used in non-genocidal and other forms of persecution committed against Jews, Blacks, and First Nations, among others. The audacity of using AIM in this instance to claim conspiracy theory to hide the misdeed that's actually taking place. And this is not to be confused with IMVE, ideologically motivated violent extremism. IMVE is the term used by the Canadian Security Intelligence Service to identify members of the radical ultra-left who burn churches, violently destroy public infrastructure, attack oil workers with axes in British Columbia, and plant car bombs with the expressed intent to maim and kill, like the recent incident in Montreal. The fact there have been no arrests for these recent activities would reveal a double standard of this Prime Minister and members of his government and where their sympathies lie. The Prime Minister called members of the Freedom Convoy misogynists, homophobes, and racists. He did so out of ignorance, hate, and the absence of evidence. The Prime Minister accused my Conservative colleague of, and I quote, answered, misinformation and disinformation and conspiracy theories. The flight took place is fact, not conspiracy theory. This fact was confirmed by the Department of National Defence after it was forced to respond to media reports. So what an incredible coincidence. The day of the Freedom Convoy began to arrive in Ottawa, there just happened to be, according to the government, a pre-planned so-called training flight to test top-secret surveillance equipment. After a clumsy attempt by DND to first disassociate itself from the spy surveillance flights, DND was forced to issue an apology as more information about the spy flights became known. DND claims it instructed the spy plane to refrain from flying over downtown Ottawa during the truckers' strike action. Canadians then learned, as an excuse to get around DND directive to stay away from the skies over the Freedom Convoy, Canadian Special Forces military leaders reportedly used a private defense contractor's military plane to conduct the spy operations. The modified small passenger plane conducting spying was outfitted with surveillance equipment, allowing for the interception of cell phone calls, radio transmissions, and other communications.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Defence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. When we stand here in the House of Commons and talk about military equipment like ships and jets and even boots on the ground, what we're really talking about are national defence security capabilities. These are the tools that make it possible for the Canadian Armed Forces to carry out the missions that are critical to the defence of Canada. And to carry out those missions, our military must maintain a state of constant readiness. Being operationally ready means training. This government expects and depends upon the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Armed Forces to do what it needs to do to maintain its mandated state of readiness and expertise. Having the right personnel properly trained to use equipment, technology, and tools is critical to readiness, and it's critical to our national defence and security. With this in mind, Madam Speaker, I'd like to address the honourable member's question about the Canadian Armed Forces training flight that took place at the same time as the protests on Parliament Hill this past February. This training flight was undertaken to maintain essential qualifications on airborne intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance-related equipment. It was planned well prior to the protests taking place on Parliament Hill and relied on an existing contract to facilitate. The training was planned as part of an annual training requirements, and the aircraft was booked in advance. Madam Speaker, I can confirm for this House that the training exercise and the protests on Parliament Hill were entirely unrelated. Canadian Armed Forces members undertake such training to support their operations abroad. In fact, airborne intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities are strictly governed by Canada and international laws. Canadians should be heartened to know that our Canadian Armed Forces members train routinely and in and around communities across the country, and indeed around the National Capital Region as well. We should expect no less if we want a military that's ready to defend our country and our way of life. During the flight in question, this training exercise took place in the vicinity of the National Capital and did travel over the downtown core. The objective was to meet annual training requirements and certification, and there was nothing extraordinary about it. But training with airborne intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities can occur at other times of the year as well. There is nothing unusual about those flights either, Madam Speaker. We know from experience that when training gets cancelled, there's a negative impact on certification and qualifications, and by extension on operational readiness. That is why the training went ahead. Madam Speaker, we must ensure our Canadian Armed Forces members are ready in this time of evolving global uncertainty. This means making sure that we have the right equipment and the right training to meet their skills on the platforms they need to be trained on when they need it. I thank the members of the Canadian Armed Forces who stand on guard for this country each and every day, defending our freedom and our democracy, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Anytime the Prime Minister or other members of the NDP Liberal Socialist Coalition, utter the words conspiracy theory, their intent is to fictionalize their own conspiracy theories to hide the truth. Using the Canadian military to spy on its own citizens is a very dangerous act. If the NDP Liberal Socialist Coalition, the Prime Minister leads, actually believes in the transparency and accountability necessary for a functioning democracy, it would provide all the data and flight logs from the spy flights. Let Canadians decide what the truth is. Did this government spy on its own citizens without the legal or moral authority to do so? This Prime Minister and his socialist coalition partners must be held accountable for its actions.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We demand a lot of our military. We've seen CAF members undertake atypical tasks like setting up vaccine distribution systems, supporting health professionals in long-term care facilities, and supporting humanitarian efforts. But above all else, our military must stand ready to defend Canada at home and abroad. That means maintaining capabilities, including highly specialized technical surveillance systems that protect our forces when the government sends them into harm's way. It means ensuring that we can move massive volumes of personnel and equipment throughout Canada and around the world. It means conducting humanitarian and search and rescue missions across vast landscapes from coast to coast to coast. We demand a lot from our military, and they deliver. And the reason they deliver is because they are trained to deliver. I thank all members of the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Armed Forces for their commitment to keeping Canadians safe and protecting Canadians' interests abroad. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member